My sister scheduled her party on my wedding day, and my entire family chose her. Even my father, the man who promised to walk me down the aisle, didn't show up. 7 people sat in 42 chairs, while I stood there pretending it didn't break me. But 3 weeks later, those same people were standing in a crowded gallery, trapped in front of the truth. A painting of my wedding day. Every empty chair, every absence, every choice they made, exposed in public, and for the first time, they couldn't look away. There were 42 chairs set up in the garden, white wood, clean lines, each one tied with a small bundle of lavender that moved gently in the afternoon breeze. From a distance, it looked like something out of a magazine, simple, elegant, peaceful. Up close, 35 of those chairs were empty. I remember noticing that before anything else. Not the flowers, not the music. Not even the fact that I was standing there in a wedding dress I had found in a second-hand shop and altered myself because I couldn't afford anything else. No. What I noticed was the silence. The kind that isn't quiet. The kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. 7 people had come. 7. I counted them twice just to make sure I wasn't being unfair. Rachel was there, of course she was. She had flown in the night before without asking a single question, like she already knew how this was going to go. Marcus stood at the end of the aisle, hands clasped in front of him, trying to look steady. From where I was standing, I could see the way his jaw tightened every few seconds. He was holding it together for me. 2 of his friends from art school sat in the second row, whispering softly, probably unsure whether to smile or look serious. There was an older man near the back, our landlord, Harold, sitting straighter than anyone else. Like this moment mattered more to him than it should. And then 2 of my college friends. 7 people, 42 chairs, 35 empty. I stood at the edge of the aisle, holding my bouquet too tightly. The lavender tied to the chairs brushed softly against the wood as the wind moved through them, filling the empty space with a sound that almost felt like someone whispering. I should have felt embarrassed. That's what I had expected. That sharp, burning feeling of being watched, judged, pitied. But it wasn't that. It was something quieter, heavier, like something inside me had finally stopped trying. My phone had rung that morning. 7:02 a.m. I knew who it was before I even looked. I answered anyway. Dad. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, just long enough for me to understand what was coming. Adeline, honey. His voice sounded careful. Too careful. I don't think we're gonna make it. I didn't say anything. I had learned a long time ago that silence makes people explain themselves. Your mother and I. Colette's event starts earlier than we thought. With the drive, it's not going to work. Colette. Of course. My sister had scheduled her baby shower on the same day as my wedding. Same day, same hours, different worlds. I promised I'd walk you down the aisle, he added quickly, like he could still fix it if he said it fast enough. You did, I said. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry. I waited for something else, something that sounded like he meant it. Nothing came. You'll have other moments, he said instead, softer now. We'll celebrate properly later. That's when something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door closing in a room I didn't realize I was still standing in. This is my wedding day, Dad? I said. He didn't answer. I won't have another one. There it was, the truth, simple, clear, final, and still, it wasn't enough to make him show up. Don't make this harder than it has to be, he said. I closed my eyes, counted to 3. Then I hung up. Rachel didn't ask what he said. She didn't need to. She just picked up the makeup brush and kept going like nothing had happened. You look beautiful, she said, steady and calm. Like she was holding the world in place for me. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Now, standing there at the start of the aisle, I adjusted my grip on the bouquet. The music started. Soft, gentle, almost too gentle for what this was. I glanced once, just once, at the rows of empty chairs, and for a second, I saw them filled. My mother adjusting her bracelet, my father standing beside me, ready to walk me forward, my aunts whispering, my cousins smiling, a version of my life that almost existed. Then the wind moved again, and the illusion disappeared. Empty, all of it. I was about to walk alone. I had already decided that. No replacement. No pretending. If they weren't there, then they weren't there. Simple as that. I took a breath. Stepped forward. Wait. The voice came from behind me, calm. Firm. I turned. Harold stood there, dressed differently than I'd ever seen him. A navy suit, perfectly fitted. A light blue pocket square tucked neatly into the jacket. He looked intentional. Like he had chosen this moment. I know this isn't my place, he said, stepping closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. But if you'll allow it. He extended his arm. I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. For a second, I just stared at him. This man, who had known me for less than 2 years. Standing where my father should have been. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Something inside my chest cracked open. Not the painful kind. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. I know, he replied. That's why it matters. I swallowed. Then slowly, I placed my hand on his arm. We walked together, down the aisle, past the empty chairs, past the silence. Toward Marcus. I didn't look left. I didn't look right. I didn't look back. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. But what I didn't know. Standing there in that quiet garden, holding on to the arm of a man who had no reason to be there, was that 3 weeks later, those empty chairs wouldn't be empty anymore. Not in the way that mattered. Because every single person who didn't show up that day was about to be forced to face it publicly, and they wouldn't be able to look away. In my family, there was a rule. No one ever said it out loud. No one needed to. It lived in the way conversations shifted, in the way decisions were made, in the way silence filled the room when something uncomfortable needed to be acknowledged. Everything revolved around my sister, Colette. If you looked at us from the outside, you wouldn't see it right away. We looked like one of those families people assume are close. A clean house in a quiet neighborhood, holiday dinners that lasted too long, photos on the wall, birthdays, graduations, vacations, smiles frozen in perfect lighting. But if you paid attention, really paid attention, you'd notice the imbalance. The way Colette entered a room and everything adjusted around her. The way my mother's voice softened when she spoke to her. The way my father leaned forward, listening more carefully, as if what she said carried more weight. And the way I learned to speak less. Colette was older than me by 4 years, but it wasn't just age, it was presence, confidence. The kind of energy that fills a space whether it deserves to or not. She didn't ask for attention, she assumed it, and everyone else followed. When Colette got married 5 years ago, my parents called it the event of the decade. 300 guests, a ballroom at a private country club, a live band, gold-trimmed invitations that came in boxes instead of envelopes. I remember standing near the back of the room, watching her walk down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. People stood. Phones lifted. Everyone watching. Everyone impressed. My father had cried, actually cried. I had never seen that before. Not at my graduation, not when I moved out, not once. But that day, he couldn't stop. She did it right. My mother whispered beside me, like she was proud of something she had built. Did it right. I didn't know there was a right way to be loved. Her husband, Brett, changed everything. Not because of who he was, but because of what he had: money. The kind that doesn't just pay bills, it shapes behavior. He bought Colette a luxury SUV within the first year. Gave my mother a credit card, just in case. Paid for a kitchen renovation my parents had been putting off for a decade. And slowly, without anyone ever saying it directly, he became the center of gravity. I remember one dinner in particular. Thanksgiving. 8 months before my wedding. The table was full: turkey, wine, side dishes laid out like a display. Everything looked perfect. That was always important to my mother. How things looked. I had brought Marcus with me. It was the first time my family met him. He stood out immediately, not because he tried to, but because he didn't. Simple shirt. Paint still faintly visible under his nails. Quiet. Observant. Real. Colette arrived late. Of course she did. Carrying 2 bottles of wine, she made sure everyone noticed. "From Napa," she said, placing them on the table like a gift no one else could match. My mother took them carefully, almost reverently. "Oh, these must have cost a fortune." Colette smiled, just slightly. Enough to confirm it. Dinner started. Conversation flowed mostly around Colette, her life, her plans, her stories. I sat there, listening, waiting for a moment to speak. It didn't come. Then my father turned to Marcus. "So," he said, cutting his turkey slowly, "what do you do?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm a painter." The table went quiet, not loudly. Just enough. The kind of silence that means something. My father nodded. "Right," he said. "But what do you actually do?" I felt it immediately. That shift. That subtle dismissal wrapped in politeness. Marcus didn't react. "I sell my work through galleries and private commissions." Brett let out a small laugh from across the table. "Art's a tough business," he said, taking a sip of wine. "Not exactly stable." Colette tilted her head, watching Marcus like he was something interesting but temporary. "At least you're passionate," she added, her tone soft but sharp underneath. I knew that tone. It sounded like kindness. It wasn't. Under the table, Marcus reached for my hand. Just for a second, a quiet pressure, grounding. He didn't defend himself, he didn't argue, he didn't need to. But I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. A quiet awareness. Like I was watching the same scene I had seen my whole life. Just from a slightly different angle. Later that night, after dinner, I stood in the kitchen alone, rinsing plates. Listening to laughter from the living room. Colette's voice rising above the rest, always a little louder. Always just enough to be heard. My mother walked in. She dried her hands on a towel, glancing toward the living room. "He seems nice," she said. "Marcus?" She nodded. There was a pause. Then, "But you need to think about your future." There it was. Not said harshly. Not said directly. But clear enough. "He is my future," I said. She smiled. "The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Sweetheart, love is important. But stability matters too." Stability. I had heard that word my whole life. It always meant the same thing: money, security, approval. Everything Marcus didn't represent to them. That night, driving back to our small studio apartment, I stared out the window. The streetlights passed in a steady rhythm. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on my knee. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. I just didn't have the words yet. "They don't get it," I said after a moment. Marcus smiled slightly. "They don't have to." I turned to look at him. "You don't care what they think?" He shrugged. "I care what you think. Simple. Uncomplicated. Real." I leaned my head back against the seat, closed my eyes. And for a moment, everything felt clear. But clarity doesn't always come with comfort. Sometimes, it just shows you the truth. And the truth was, in my family, love wasn't equal. It was earned, measured, compared, and more often than not, given to the person who needed it the least. I had spent years trying to fit into that system, to be enough, to be seen. But sitting there in that car, with Marcus beside me, I felt something unfamiliar, something quiet, something steady. The beginning of a question. What if I stopped trying? I didn't know it then, but that question was the first step toward everything that came next. Because a few weeks later, my sister wouldn't just take the spotlight again, she would take my wedding day. And this time, my family wouldn't hesitate to follow her. I met Marcus on a day that wasn't supposed to matter. It wasn't dramatic, no music, no slow motion, no moment where the world paused and everything suddenly made sense. It was a Thursday afternoon, cold, gray, forgettable. I was standing inside a small local gallery in New Haven, staring at a painting I didn't understand. A woman sitting on a fire escape. That was it. No bright colors, no dramatic expression, just stillness, and yet I couldn't stop looking at it. It's not finished. The voice came from behind me. Certain. I turned. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't entirely sure he should have said anything. What do you mean? I asked. He nodded toward the painting. The light's wrong, he said. It's too safe. I frowned slightly. It looks fine to me, he smiled. Yeah, he said quietly. That's the problem. That was the first thing I learned about Marcus. He didn't care about what was fine. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Nothing important, nothing life-changing. But when I walked out of that gallery, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. Not excitement, not even curiosity. Just a shift. Like I had seen something real in a place where everything usually felt performative. 3 years later, we were sitting on the floor of our studio apartment, eating takeout straight from the containers because we hadn't bought proper plates yet. The heater made a soft clicking noise every few seconds. The windows rattled when the wind picked up. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't stable. It definitely wasn't what my parents had imagined for me, but it was ours. You ever think about what your life would look like if you chose differently? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Marcus didn't look up from the sketch he was working on. All the time, he said. I waited. He glanced at me. But not in the way you think. How then? He set the pencil down. If I chose differently, he said, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. Simple. No hesitation. I looked around the apartment. Paint-stained floors. Half-finished canvases leaning against the wall. A second-hand couch that dipped in the middle. This wasn't what stability looked like. At least not the version I had been taught. Sometimes I wonder if I'm making things harder than they need to be, I admitted. Marcus studied me for a moment. Harder for who? He asked. I didn't need to. We both knew. My family didn't say it directly. They didn't have to. It showed in the questions they asked. The pauses between words. The way they said things like, Are you sure about this? He seems nice, but what's the long-term plan? It all meant the same thing. Marcus wasn't enough. A week later, I went to my parents' house alone. Marcus had work to finish. Or maybe he just didn't want to sit through another dinner where he had to quietly justify his existence. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived. She hugged me lightly, like she was distracted. Colette's coming later, she said. Of course she was. We sat at the table. Biscuits. The usual. Good, I said. I just finished a new illustration series. That's nice. A pause. And Marcus? There it was. He's working on a new commission, I said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Commission, she repeated. Yeah. From who? I hesitated. I'm not sure. A private client. She nodded slowly. Well, that's good. But her tone said something else. Temporary, uncertain, not real. When Colette arrived, the room shifted instantly. Energy, movement, attention. She sat down like she owned the space. I heard Marcus is still painting, she said casually. Yeah, I replied. She smiled. That's brave, brave. The word landed heavier than it should have. Dinner was worse. My father asked about investments. Brett talked about property deals, numbers, plans, stability, everything Marcus wasn't. And what about you? My father asked, turning to me. Are you thinking long term? I felt it. That pressure. That quiet expectation, I said, and I took a breath. Marcus is my long term. Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. My father leaned back slightly. That's not what I know, I said. That was the moment, small, almost invisible. But it mattered. Because for the first time, I didn't try to explain, I didn't soften it. I didn't make it easier for them to accept. I just sat there. Certain. Later that night, as I was leaving, my mother walked me to the door. You're choosing a difficult path, she said gently. I looked at her. No, I replied. I'm choosing my path. That was the line, clear, unmovable. When I got back to the apartment, Marcus was still awake, paint on his hands, music playing softly in the background. He looked up as I walked in. How was it? I set my bag down. Different. He studied me. Good different or bad different. I smiled slightly. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't need to. A few days later, Harold came downstairs while Marcus was working. He stood quietly for a while watching, like he always did. You're wasting time on the wrong buyers, he said suddenly. Marcus paused. What do you mean? Harold took a sip of his coffee. You're pricing your work for people who don't understand it. I leaned against the wall, listening. And who should I be pricing it for? Marcus asked. Harold looked at him carefully. People who do. There was something in the way he said it. Not advice. Not suggestion, something else. Send me photos of your latest work, Harold added. I know someone who might be interested. Marcus nodded. Okay. Simple. No excitement. But I felt it. That shift again, quiet. Subtle, important. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. Yeah. Why? He turned his head slightly. Because he doesn't talk like someone who's guessing. I thought about that. About Harold. About the way he watched. The way he spoke. The way he noticed things other people ignored. Something was happening. I could feel it. I just didn't know what yet, and maybe that was the point. Because sometimes, the biggest changes in your life don't arrive loudly. They don't announce themselves. They don't ask for permission. They start quietly, in small conversations, in overlooked moments, in choices that don't seem important, until they are. And the choice I had made, to stand my ground, to stop bending, to stop trying to fit into a version of life that was never meant for me. That was the moment everything began to change. I just didn't know yet how far it was about to go. The first sign that something was wrong was silence. Not the normal kind. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that feels intentional, like something is happening without you. It started 3 weeks before my wedding. By then, everything was already set. The venue was booked, a small garden in Mystic. 42 chairs, wildflowers, an arch Marcus had built himself from reclaimed wood, nothing extravagant. Nothing my family would consider impressive. But it was enough. It was ours. I had sent out the invitations by hand, each one slightly different. Watercolor flowers I painted myself. Marcus had joked that no one would notice the difference. But I knew. And that was enough for me. The responses started coming in slowly, friends first, then a few extended relatives, polite, short, normal. My family said nothing. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get busy, they forget, they assume they have time. But then, my phone rang. Aunt Patricia. I almost didn't answer. She usually called when she had something to say that didn't belong to her. Hi, honey, she said, her voice already carrying that familiar tone. Light, but loaded. How are the wedding plans going? Good, I said. Everything's almost ready. Oh, good, good. A pause. Too long. Listen, she continued, lowering her voice slightly. Are you going to Colette's event too, or just focusing on your wedding? I frowned. What event? Her baby shower. She said. It's the same day, isn't it? Everything inside me stilled. What? June 14th. Sweetheart. At the Greenwich Country Club. Didn't you get the invitation? No. I hadn't. I hung up and stared at my phone for a long moment, waiting for something to make sense. It didn't. I called Colette. She answered on the third ring. Bright. Effortless. Oh my God, Addie, heh! Too prepared. You scheduled your baby shower on my wedding day. Silence. Just for a second. Then, oh. Like she had just remembered. Like it had slipped her mind. I didn't realize the venue only had that date available. She said quickly. It's a whole thing with the caterer and everything. You know how these places are. No, I didn't. Because I had never planned an event that required explaining away someone else's wedding. My wedding is at 3, I said slowly. Right, she replied. And the shower is at noon. People can probably do both. I closed my eyes. Greenwich to Mystic. At least an hour and a half. On a good day. They can't, I said. Another pause. Shorter this time. More controlled. Well, she said lightly. This is my first baby, Addie. There it was. The unspoken hierarchy. You can have a wedding anytime. The words landed softly. Too softly. Like they were designed to avoid sounding cruel. But they weren't soft, they were precise. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, holding the phone, realizing something I should understood a long time ago. This wasn't an accident. I hope you understand, she added. Her voice was gentle, almost kind. I do, I said, and for the first time, I meant it. I hung up. The next call was my mother. She answered immediately. Honey, I was just thinking about you. Did you know? Silence. Not surprised, not confused, just silence. I know it's not ideal, she said finally. Not ideal, like we were discussing scheduling conflicts. Not choices. Mom, I said quietly. I know, she replied. But Colette really needs the family there. Needs. I need you there. The words came out before I could stop them. And as soon as they did, I regretted them. Not because they weren't true, but because I already knew the answer. Honey, she said softly. The tone she used when she was about to say something I wouldn't like. This is her first baby. I let the silence sit between us. Can you postpone? She asked, just like that. Like it was simple. Like it didn't matter. Firm. Clear. Final. Well, maybe not everyone needs to be at both. That was the moment. The exact moment. When it stopped being about logistics and became about choice. I called my father next. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. He called back 3 hours later. Hey, sweetheart. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. Are you still walking me down the aisle? Straight to it. No space for deflection. But enough. Of course, he said. But something in the way he said it felt borrowed. I said I would, he added. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay. But deep down, something had already shifted. That night, Rachel came over. I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. She read it on my face. What happened? She asked. I handed her my phone. She scrolled. She did it on purpose, Rachel said. Not a question. A statement. I know. Rachel looked up at me. Are you gonna ask them to choose? I thought about it. About calling each of them. Explaining. Pleading. And then I shook my head. No. If they don't come. Rachel said quietly. You'll know. I met her eyes. I already do. That night, I sent one final message to everyone, family, group chat. No emotion, no pressure. Just facts, date, time, location. And one line at the end. I hope to see you there. The message delivered instantly, and then nothing, no replies, no questions, no hesitation, just silence. The kind that answers everything. Over the next few days, the RSVPs came in, one by one. No. Can't make it. Sorry, prior commitment. 22 family members. All going to Greenwich. I didn't cry, not then. Because something inside me had already started to settle. Not sadness. Not anger. Clarity. They weren't confused. They weren't conflicted, they had chosen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fight that choice. I was just going to remember it. I woke up at 7:00 a.m., not because I had slept well, but because my body refused to stay still any longer. The room was quiet, too quiet. For a moment I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what day it was. Then it hit me, my wedding day. I turned my head slowly. My dress hung on the closet door, ivory lace. Simple, perfect, not expensive, not impressive, but mine. Rachel was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the bathroom counter, going through a small makeup bag like she was preparing for surgery. "You're up," she said, glancing at me in the mirror. "Yeah." My voice sounded normal, strangely normal. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I think so." We both knew that wasn't what she meant. My phone was on the nightstand. Face down, I hadn't checked it yet. Part of me didn't want to. Part of me still hoped. I reached for it anyway. Turned it over. Nothing. No messages, no missed calls. No, "Good morning." No, "We're on our way." No, "We love you." Just silence. Rachel didn't say anything. She just walked over, took the phone from my hand, and placed it back down. "Sit," she said gently. I sat. She started doing my makeup, slow, careful, focused. Like if she kept her hand steady, everything else would stay steady too. "You look beautiful," she said after a while. I watched her in the mirror. "I haven't even put the dress on yet." She smiled slightly. "That's not what I meant." I swallowed. Looked away. At 7:42 a.m., my phone rang. I didn't need to check, I already knew. I picked it up. Dad. There it was. That pause. That same pause. "Adeline, honey." His voice sounded smaller than usual. Like it had already decided what it was going to do. "I don't think we're going to make it." I closed my eyes. Not surprise. Not anymore. "Your mother and I, Colette's shower starts at noon. With the drive, it's just not possible to do both. Not possible." I let the words settle. Felt them. Understood them. "You promised," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. "I know," he replied quickly. "And I'm sorry, but this is important. It's her first baby. You understand." I took a breath. Slow, controlled. "This is my wedding day," I said. "I know, sweetheart." "No." I interrupted softly. "You don't." Silence. "You'll have other moments," he said finally, and just like that, everything I had been holding on to broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. "There won't be another one?" I said. Another pause. Then, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." That was it. I hung up. I didn't cry, not yet. I placed the phone down carefully, like it was something fragile. Rachel didn't ask what he said. She just picked up the mascara wand. "Look up," she said softly, and I did. At 9:00 Rachel checked Instagram. She didn't mean to show me, but she did. Pink balloons, gold decorations, a perfectly arranged table. My family, all of them standing together, smiling, laughing. The caption read, "So grateful to have everyone here." Everyone. I stared at the screen, longer than I should have. Then I handed the phone back. "Okay?" I said. That was it. No anger, no breakdown, just, okay. Because in that moment, something changed. Not in them. In me. By the time we arrived at the venue, the sun was high. The garden looked exactly how I imagined it would. Soft light. Green grass. White chairs. Lavender tied to each one. From far away, it looked full. Perfect. Up close, it was empty. 35 empty chairs. I stopped walking. Just for a second. This was it. The moment I had tried not to imagine. Rachel touched my arm. "I'm here," she said. I nodded. Marcus was already at the end of the aisle, standing still, waiting. When he saw me, his expression didn't break, but I could see it. The pain, the anger, the way he was holding it all back. For me. "I can walk you down," Rachel said quietly. I shook my head. No. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it honestly, alone. The music started. Soft, gentle. I took one step forward. Then, I turned. Harold stood behind me. Not in his usual clothes. Not in his usual quiet presence. A real one. Perfectly fitted. Intentional. "I know this isn't my place," he said calmly. "But if you'd let me," he extended his arm, "I'd be honored." For a second, I couldn't move. This man, who had no obligation, no expectation, showing up. When the people who were supposed to didn't. "You don't have to," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." Something inside my chest finally gave way. Not pain. Not anymore. Something lighter. I placed my hand on his arm, and together, we walked. Past the empty chairs. Past everything that had been missing. Toward something that wasn't. The ceremony was short. Simple. Real. 7 people. But every single one of them had chosen to be there, and for the first time that day, that felt like enough. That night, after the music faded, after the laughter softened, after everyone left, I sat alone for a moment, and I picked up my phone, one last time. Still nothing. No messages. No calls. No acknowledgement. Like the day had never happened. I stared at the screen. Then slowly, I turned it off. Because something had finally become clear. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been busy. They hadn't been confused. They had chosen. And for the first time in my life, I chose to remember. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't always feel like breaking. Sometimes, it feels like quiet. The morning after the wedding, I woke up before Marcus. The room still smelled faintly of lavender. We had brought some of it back from the chairs. Little bundles tied with white string, now sitting in jars around the apartment. A reminder of what had been there, and what hadn't. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the weight to hit, the sadness, the anger, something. But it didn't come. Instead, there was this unfamiliar stillness. Not peace, not yet, but something close. Marcus shifted beside me, his arm brushing lightly against mine. "You're awake," he murmured. "Yeah." He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't need to. "I was thinking," he said after a moment, still half asleep, "we should keep the lavender." I smiled slightly. "We already did." He opened one eye, looked around the room, then smiled back. "Good," he said. That was Marcus. No grand speeches, no forced comfort, just presence. And somehow, that mattered more than anything anyone had said yesterday. Later that afternoon, Rachel came over, still in her scrubs, hair pulled back. Tired, but steady. She dropped her bag by the door and looked around. "You survived," she said. I laughed, softly, barely. She walked over and hugged me. "Real. I'm proud of you," she said quietly. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. We sat together on the floor, eating leftover pizza from the night before. No plates, no ceremony, just us. "Have they called?" Rachel asked after a while. I shook my head. "No." "Good," she said. I frowned slightly. "Good." "Yeah," she replied. "Now you don't have to decide how to respond." I let that sit, because she was right. Silence was easier than excuses. That evening, Harold stopped by. He knocked softly, like he always did. "Never assuming, never intruding. Just wanted to check on you too," he said as I opened the door. He stepped inside, holding a small paper bag. "I brought bread," he added, almost as an afterthought. Of course he did. We sat at the table, if you could call it that. A slightly uneven surface, paint stains still visible along the edges. You handled yourself well yesterday, Harold said calmly. I looked at him. Did I? He nodded. Most people would have spent the whole day thinking about who wasn't there. I didn't respond. Because he wasn't wrong. And you didn't, he continued. You focused on who was. I glanced at Marcus, at Rachel, at Harold. 7 people. The number echoed in my mind. 7, I said quietly. Harold smiled slightly. 7 is enough. I thought about that. Because my whole life, I had been taught that more meant better, more people, more approval, more validation. But yesterday, 7 had been enough to hold me together. Enough to walk me forward. Enough to make it real. You know, Harold added, leaning back slightly, people like to believe family is something you're given. He paused. Then, but more often than not, it's something you choose. The words settled deeper than I expected. Because for the first time, I understood them. Not as an idea, but as truth. That night, after everyone left, Marcus and I sat on the floor again. The same place we always ended up. No distractions. No noise. Just quiet. I keep thinking about something, I said. He looked at me. What? I thought it would hurt more. He didn't answer right away. Then, maybe it already did, he said softly. I looked at him. Maybe it's been hurting for a long time, he added. You just finally stopped pretending it didn't. That hit differently, because wasn't new. It was just clear now. And clarity, even when it hurts, has a strange way of making things easier. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Closed my eyes. I don't think I want to fix it anymore, I whispered. Marcus didn't hesitate. Then don't. Simple. Final. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to consider that, not fixing, not chasing, not proving, just letting go. And in that space, something new began to form. Not revenge, not anger, something quieter, stronger, self-respect. I didn't know what that would look like yet. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to who I had been before. And somewhere, beneath all of that quiet, beneath the stillness, beneath the absence of everything I thought I needed, something was building, slowly, silently. And when it finally surfaced, everything was going to change. The first week after the wedding felt unreal, not because something big happened, but because nothing did. No messages, no calls, no "we're sorry." Nothing. At first I kept checking, out of habit. Not hope. At least that's what I told myself. Morning. Afternoon. Unlock. Scroll. Lock. Silence. By the 3rd day, it stopped surprising me. By the 5th, it started making sense. Because silence isn't always absence. Sometimes, it's a decision. And my family had made theirs. On the 8th day, I sent one message. Just one. I didn't overthink it. I didn't rewrite it 10 times. I didn't try to sound calm or strong or unaffected. I just told the truth. Thank you for your silence. It told me everything your words never could. I won't be reaching out again. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. I read it once. Then I sent it. The message delivered instantly. I didn't wait. I didn't watch for typing bubbles. I didn't check if it was read. I turned my phone over. And for the first time, I meant it. 2 days later, my mother replied. Of course she did. Adeline, don't be dramatic. We love you. It was just bad timing, bad timing. I stared at the message, long enough to feel it, short enough not to let it settle. Then I locked the phone, because some words don't deserve a response. That same afternoon, Marcus was working on something new. I hadn't seen it yet. Not fully. The canvas was larger than usual, propped against the wall, covered halfway. What are you working on? I asked. He hesitated, just for a second. Something different, he said. I stepped closer. He didn't stop me. When I pulled the cloth back, I froze. It was a row of chairs, white. 42 of them. My breath caught. 7 were filled, painted in warm tones, soft, alive, the rest empty, not blank. Not unfinished empty, but not meaningless. The light fell across them in a way that made the absence feel intentional, heavy. Present. What is this? I asked quietly. Marcus didn't look up from where he stood. It's called the 7th chair, he said. I swallowed. It's about what's missing, he added. I didn't move. Because I understood immediately. This wasn't just a painting. It was the wedding. Not the version people imagine. Not the one with flowers and vows and music. The real one. The one with space where people should have been. The one that hurt. You don't have to paint this, I said softly. Marcus shook his head. I need to, he replied. There was no anger in his voice. No bitterness, just truth, and somehow, that made it harder to look at. That evening Harold came by again. Same knock, same quiet presence. Marcus showed him the painting without saying a word. Harold stood in front of it for a long time. Longer than usual. He didn't speak immediately. Then, Marcus looked at him. What do you mean? Harold stepped closer, studying the details. You stopped painting what people want to see, he said. He turned slightly, looked at Marcus directly, and started painting what matters. The room went quiet, because this time it felt different, not like advice, not like observation, like recognition. Harold reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Typed something, quick, deliberate. What are you doing? I asked. He glanced at me briefly. Opening a door, he said. That was it. No explanation, no detail. Just that. I didn't ask more. Because something about the way he said it. Over the next few days, Marcus worked non-stop. More paintings. Same theme. Empty spaces. A dinner table with one chair pushed back. A church pew with a folded program. A living room with a seat no one had taken. Absence. Everywhere. And somehow, each one felt heavier than the last. Like he was turning something invisible into something no one could ignore. Meanwhile, my phone stayed silent until it didn't. 2 weeks after the wedding, a notification appeared. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me open it. Adeline, this is Caldwell Gallery in New York. We've recently seen Marcus Delaney's work. We'd like to discuss a potential exhibition. I read it once. Then again, my heart didn't race. It didn't need to. Because something inside me already knew. This was the shift. I looked up. Marcus was across the room, focused on another canvas. Paint on his hands. Same as always, nothing about him looked different. And yet, everything was about to be. Marcus, I said. He didn't turn. Yeah. I held the phone out. He walked over slowly, wiped his hands on a cloth, read the message. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, okay, he said, just that. No excitement, no reaction, just okay. I stared at him. That's it, I asked. He looked at me, smiled slightly. It's a start. And for the first time since the wedding, I smiled too, because I understood something now. The silence that followed that day wasn't the end, it was space. Space for something else to grow, something real, and whatever was coming next wasn't going to ask for permission. The first time someone important noticed Marcus, we didn't even know it had happened. It wasn't announced. There was no message, no phone call, no email waiting to be opened, just another normal day. Marcus had agreed, reluctantly, to let one of his paintings hang in a small independent gallery in New Haven. Not the kind people travel for. Not the kind critics write about. Just a quiet space where local artists rotated work every few weeks. I don't expect anything from it, he had told me when he dropped the painting off. I just don't want it sitting in the corner collecting dust. The painting he chose was one of the first from the new series. A long row of white chairs, 7 filled, the rest empty. He didn't title it, didn't explain it, didn't even price it properly. He just left it there. Like it didn't matter. That Saturday I went to see it. The gallery smelled faintly of paint and old wood. Quiet. Almost empty. The painting was hung on the far wall. Soft light above it. Nothing dramatic. But still, it stood out. I walked closer, and even though I had already seen it, it felt different here. Larger. Heavier. Like the space around it had made the silence louder. I stood there for a while, long enough to forget where I was, until I noticed someone else in the room. An older man, standing a few feet away, hands behind his back. Perfectly still. He wasn't looking at anything else, just that painting. I watched him for a moment. The way his head tilted slightly. The way he leaned in, just enough. Not confused. Not curious. Focused. Like he wasn't just seeing it, he was understanding it. After a while he stepped closer, almost unconsciously. And then, he spoke. "Who painted this?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The gallery assistant looked up from behind the desk. She said. The man nodded slowly. "And where is he now?" "He's not here," she replied. "But I can give you his contact." The man didn't answer right away. He stepped even closer to the painting. Close enough that he could see the brushwork. The detail. The intention. His fingers hovered slightly in the air, like he almost wanted to touch it, but didn't. "Leave it up," he said quietly. The assistant blinked. "Leave it up," he repeated. Calm, certain, something in his tone shifted the room. "Of course," she said quickly. He nodded once, then turned, and walked out. Just like that. No name, no explanation, nothing. When I got back to the apartment that evening, Marcus was painting. Of course he was, same position, same focus, same quiet intensity. "You should have seen it," I said, dropping my bag. He didn't look up. "Seen what?" "Your painting," I replied. "In the gallery." That got his attention. He turned slightly. "And?" I smiled. "Someone was standing in front of it for almost 20 minutes. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's a long time." He didn't look confused. I added. Marcus nodded slowly. "Good," he said, then went back to painting. That was it, no excitement, no questions. Just, good. 2 days later the gallery called. Not Marcus. Me, I almost didn't answer. "Hi, is this Adeline?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Claire from the Elm Street Gallery. I'm calling about Marcus Delaney's painting." My stomach tightened slightly. "Is everything okay?" A pause. "Yes, more than okay." I sat down. "There's someone who's very interested in his work," she continued. "He's asked to meet Marcus." Ooh, another pause. "I think it would be better if he told you himself." That didn't help. "When?" I asked. "He's coming back tomorrow." Tomorrow. I looked across the room. Marcus was still painting, unaware. "Okay," I said. "We'll be there?" That night felt different. Not bigger. Not dramatic, just charged. Like something had shifted slightly out of place and hadn't settled yet. The next day, we went together. The gallery was busier than usual. Not crowded, but active. People moved slower, looked longer. Marcus's painting was still there, but now, it wasn't alone. 3 people stood in front of it, talking quietly, and then, he walked in, same man. Same stillness. This time, he didn't look around. He walked straight to the painting, like it had pulled him back. Then he turned. His eyes landed on Marcus, and something in his expression shifted. "You're the one who painted this," he said. Not a question. Marcus nodded. "Yes." The man stepped closer, studied him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, "How much do you want for it?" Direct. Marcus hesitated, because he hadn't expected this. "Not like this." "I don't know," he said honestly. Good answer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card. "Call me," he said. And just like that, he handed Marcus the card. No negotiation, no discussion, just certainty. Then he turned and walked away again. I looked at Marcus. He looked at the card, turned it over. His expression didn't change, but I saw it. That moment, that realization. "Who is he?" I whispered. Marcus didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "I think," he said, "who's someone who matters." And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were waiting anymore. It felt like something had finally started. We didn't call him that night, not because we weren't curious, not because it didn't matter, but because something about the way he had walked in, looked, decided and left, felt too deliberate to rush. The card sat on the table between us face down, like it carried weight. Marcus didn't touch it. He went back to painting, same focus. But I could feel it, that shift again. Subtle, but real. I picked up the card, turned it over. There was no company logo. No long title, no unnecessary detail, just a name, Victor Ashland, and a number, that was it. "Do you know who that is?" I asked. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No." I stared at the name. It sounded important. The kind of name that didn't introduce itself. "I think you should call him," I said. Marcus looked at the painting in front of him, not at me. "Tomorrow," he replied, again. "Tomorrow." I almost smiled. Because that was him. Never chasing, never rushing, even when something big was right in front of him. The next morning, he called. Short conversation. Less than 3 minutes. I couldn't hear the other side, but I watched Marcus's face. Still, focused, listening more than speaking. Then, "Okay," he said, and the call ended. I waited. "Well?" I asked. Marcus placed the phone down. "He wants to meet," he said. "Where?" "New York." "When?" "Today." That was new. No delay. "No, tomorrow." "Today." We left within an hour. The drive felt different this time. Quieter. Not tense. Not anxious. Just aware. Like both of us understood. This wasn't random anymore. This was something. The address led us to a building that didn't need a sign. It didn't have one. Tall, glass. Minimal. The kind of place you don't question. It matters. Inside, everything was quiet. Not empty. Controlled. A woman at the front desk looked up. "Marcus Delaney," she said before we even spoke. Not recognized. That was new. We were led upstairs. A private room. Large windows. Soft light. And there he was. Victor Ashland. Sitting exactly the way he had stood in the gallery, still. Intentional. He didn't stand when we entered. He just looked at Marcus, like he was confirming something. "You came," he said. Marcus nodded. "You asked me to." A small smile. "Good. No introductions. Direct." "I've been collecting art for 30 years, Victor said. His voice was calm. Not loud, not impressive. Certain. "I've seen talent," he continued. "A lot of it?" He paused, looked at Marcus again. "But I've only seen truth a few times." The room went still. "And that painting," he added, "is truth." Marcus didn't respond, didn't thank him, didn't react. He just listened. Victor leaned forward slightly. Marcus hesitated. "8 so far," he said. Victor nodded. "I want 12. I blinked. Marcus didn't. Not defensive. Not surprised, just clear. Victor smiled. "Because incomplete truth doesn't interest me." Silence. Then, Victor added, just like that. No build-up, no negotiation. "I want the full series," he continued. 12 paintings. Delivered over the next 18 months. 18 months. "I'll also introduce you to the right people," he said. "Not many. Just enough. Enough." That word again. I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement, not disbelief, recognition. This wasn't luck. This was access. The same word Harold had used. Marcus finally spoke. "What do you get out of it?" Victor leaned back. "Clarity," he said. That was it. "Not money. Not control. Clarity. I invest in what matters," he added. "And right now." He looked at the painting Marcus had brought with him. "You matter." We left the building without saying much. Not because we didn't have questions, but because We both knew this was real. And once something becomes real, you don't need to explain it, you just move with it. That night, back in the apartment, Marcus placed the card on the table again. Same place, same position. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now, it wasn't just a name. It was a door. And it had opened. I looked at Marcus. He was already back at the canvas, working, like nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Because somewhere, far beyond the quiet of our small apartment, beyond the people who had ignored us, beyond the family who had chosen something else, something was building. Something bigger than them, bigger than us. And soon, it wouldn't stay quiet anymore. The invitation arrived quietly, no drama, no announcement, just a message from the gallery. Opening night, the 7th chair, Caldwell Gallery, New York. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down 3 weeks ago. No one had shown up to my wedding. Now, 200 people were expected to show up, to look at it. Life has a strange sense of timing. The night of the exhibition, the gallery was full, not crowded, not chaotic, full, the kind of full that feels intentional. Every person there was there for a reason. Soft conversations, quiet footsteps, eyes moving slowly from one painting to the next. And everywhere I looked, I saw it, the chairs, different spaces, different settings. But always the same truth, something missing, something chosen. Marcus stood near the center of the room. Simple black suit, no performance. No need for attention. People came to him, not the other way around. Collects curators, writers, each one asking questions, listening carefully, because now they saw what I had always seen, not just talent, truth. I stayed near the back, watching, not hiding, just observing. And then, my family, all of them, standing at the entrance, my mother, my father, even Brett. For a moment, no one moved. Like they weren't sure they belonged there. Like they didn't recognize the space. Or maybe, they didn't recognize me. I watched as they stepped inside. Slowly, carefully, their eyes moved across the room, taking everything in, and then they saw it. The centerpiece, the painting. June 14th, 42 chairs. 7 filled. 35 empty. The light falling across the empty seats, like it was trying to show something, not hide it. My father stopped walking. My mother's hand tightened around her purse. Colette's expression shifted. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition. Because they knew. They didn't need anyone to explain it. They were looking at their choice. Framed. Lit, impossible to ignore. A small group had gathered around the painting, whispering. As it based on something real, someone asked. Marcus stood nearby, calm. Steady, he said. The room quieted slightly. It was my wedding day. Silence, not loud, but heavy. 7 people came, he added. No anger, no accusation. Just truth, and somehow, that made it louder. I watched my father. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared. At the empty chairs. At the space where he should have been. My mother looked down, then back up, then away. Colette crossed her arms, a defense. Too late. Because this wasn't a conversation anymore. This was exposure, public, permanent. And there was nothing they could say that would change what everyone was seeing. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, they weren't controlling the narrative. They weren't the center. They were part of the story, and not the part they would have chosen. A reporter stepped closer to Marcus, notebook in hand. The title, June 14th, she said. Why that date? Marcus didn't hesitate. It's the day people showed me who they were. I felt that. Deep. Because it wasn't just about them. It was about me. About what I had finally seen. About what I had stopped ignoring. Later that evening, my father found me, not in the center, not where people were watching, in a quiet corner. His voice was different, not strong, not certain. I turned. He looked older, not because of time, because of weight. I saw it, he said. I know. A pause. I didn't realize, he started, then stopped. Because there was nothing to finish. You chose. I said gently, not accusing, not angry, just honest. He nodded slowly. I did. Silence. I'm sorry, he said, and this time, it sounded different, not convenient, not expected, earned. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw someone who understood, not completely, not perfectly, but enough. You can't change that day, I said. I know. But you can decide what happens next. He nodded again. I'd like that, he said quietly. I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a process, and I wasn't rushing it. Later, as the gallery began to empty, I stood beside Marcus. People were still talking about the paintings, still asking questions, still trying to understand something we had already lived. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, and I meant it, because something had finally settled. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. I looked around the room one last time, at the people who had come, at the ones who had stayed, at the truth that had finally been seen, and I realized something. The empty chairs were never really about who was missing. They were about who remained. 7 people. That was all it took. To build something real, to start over, to choose a different story. I took Marcus's hand, held it tightly, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about who hadn't shown up. I was thinking about who had.